Welcome in to the Just Basketball Show for Tuesday, May 30th. Hope everyone had a great Memorial Day weekend. I am Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. As always, want to thank Jake Stevens and Dillon Heiser for production. We have the NBA Finals matchup. The Miami Heat culture won, I guess. I don't know. We'll talk about it. They went into Boston and won Game 7, 103-84. Pretty much dominating Boston. Obviously, there's a Tatum ankle injury and some other things, but the Heat are going to the finals. We're going to talk about Game 7. We're going to preview a finals matchup between the Denver Nuggets and the Miami Heat. We'll see if we get a live betting line perhaps as we go here. We'll see how fast our friends at BetMGM can get that up. And we're also going to talk about some coaching stuff. Adrian Griffin is going to be the new head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. Nick Nurse is going to Philadelphia. Brendon, there's something I want to ask you about a certain word called leverage play that relates to the team you cover primarily, the Phoenix Suns, which seems to have happened twice now. But we're going to specifically look at high-pressure hires, what recent history can tell us about these high-pressure hires, what to avoid, what we know is important, and just how Adrian Griffin in particular is a bold hire in some ways for the Milwaukee Bucks. But let's start with Game 7. I mean, Brendon, Caleb Martin just might be. Should he be the new logo? Like, should he replace Jerry West? Like, where are we at with the Caleb Martin just being the best player for the Miami Heat in a Game 7 on the road?
This series is a real testament to the Heat. I mean, I know that's an obvious thing to say, but I was looking back at the 2020 finals, and that was a veteran team. If you really look at who played, it was Andre Iguodala, it was Jay Crowder, it was Goran Dragic, it was Kelly Olynyk. This team is younger, less proven, less experienced, and yet here they are. And I think Caleb Martin is as good of an example as any of that. Like, I mean, he just has turned into an offensive superpower in a way that I don't think anybody expected. Just had an answer for every single shot. Anytime Boston made a run, it wasn't necessarily Jimmy, it wasn't necessarily Kyle Lowry or even their three-point shooters. It was Caleb Martin, who they could not keep track of in transition and who, just seemed to get his hands on offensive rebounds and everything else to answer the call there. And they needed it because Jimmy had a good second half, but Bam was not very good in this game. Gabe Vincent had a good first half, not a good second half, and it was really it. They needed Caleb Martin, of all people, a guy who's making $7 million, and we didn't even know him apart from his brother like a month ago. We thought they were the same person. We didn't know which one was a Hornet and which one was a member of the Miami Heat.
Sure.
I mean, did you know? Did you have told me the difference?
I mean, no, honestly, no. Brendon, you calling this a testament to the Heat to me feels perfect. Like, that is the perfect way to surmise how we got here with them. I think this whole playoff run for them, they've never been the best team, most talented team in any series they have played. They have not. They will not be in the finals. The Denver Nuggets are a better basketball team and a more talented basketball team with a better player will have the best player in the series. And the Heat are there. They had a negative point differential in the regular season. They lost. They were up 3-0, lost 3 in a row, lost a game at home in heartbreaking fashion. I think that where I go with this more than anything else is it's cliche. I get it. I think this has to be this is the most mentally tough team I think we have in the league. This is what it feels like coming out of this. I think other teams, Brendon, would have lost the way they lost in Game 6.
Yeah.
And it's over. That would have been the catalyst in another situation for the team that won Game 6 like Boston did to go back home and just stomp the Heat, stomp their opponent in that situation, complete the history, do all that stuff, win the game. That was never really in play for Miami, and that's despite Jimmy Butler has 28 in this game. Mm-hmm. But he took 2 free throws and was 12 of 28 from the field. This is with Bam Adebayo looking lost on offense for much of this game.
Yeah.
4 of 10 from the field. This team just is always having answers for what is in front of them and outplaying their talent. It's been incredible. As much as it is not always the most fun, flashy basketball, that is what they do. They outwork you, and they outgrind you, and they out-tough you mentally. That is what this Heat team is.
Well, and in Game 6 and 7, Boston actually started well. That's one of the interesting things here is obviously Boston won Game 6, but the Heat had a lead, and then that game was very back and forth. And then in this one, Boston started 4 of 6, and then they were 4 of their next 27 after that. And Miami was able to put together a run. I think it was like a 19-4 run that they responded with. Bam had his third foul in the second quarter. There were multiple times in the third quarter when the Celtics cut it to single digits on threes. Tatum started to get into somewhat of a groove. You mentioned the ankle turn, and it was impossible to predict what level he was at moment to moment. I'm not even fully sure that he knew until he went up and actually tried to do something, how he was feeling. And yet, no matter what any of that looked like, as we mentioned, they just seemed to have an answer. They only got to the free throw line 6 times. And yes, they were 14 of 28 from deep, but that primarily came from a couple of guys. And Bam wasn't good. Their point guards weren't very good. I mean, I thought Lowry was all right, I guess. But it's just another box score that you look up and you don't have a great grasp on exactly how they ended up in position to win this game.
I am again just flabbergasted, I think, by like the fact that they got here. I mean, they won this game 7 on their own. Game 6, they were really buoyed. Miami was by guys, they're like role guys being hot from the get-go. And that didn't even exactly happen here. They weren't like put ahead by like Caleb Martin ended up playing great, but weren't like buoyed by them in the front. And it's just they're constantly just kind of there. Like you're getting 8 from Strus, you're getting 10 from Robinson. Haywood Highsmith, has a timely bucket at this point. Look, Lowry didn't play great. 5 assists, 2 turnovers, 7 points. Was a plus 26, whatever single game plus minus is worth. Yeah. And he hits that he hit a jump shot that I texted you, Kyle Lowry, oh my God, about, because he hits a step back over Jaylen Brown, and Jaylen Brown's like not even really contesting it.
Can we talk about the shot that Jaylen Brown took before that? I think that the place.
Well, I think can we just have a Jaylen Brown conversation?
Because the place to go, the real reason that they're here, right, is the Celtics rolled over a little bit again and didn't have answers here, and I think from the Brown perspective, it can't be separated from Tatum getting hurt, and I think. If this game showed us anything about Jaylen Brown, to me, it is the limitations of what he can realistically be asked to do in a situation when he's not a supporting player, making others better by doing what he does, filling in the gaps. If he has to be uncomfortable, he just doesn't have enough there. The ball had to be in his hands, and it's just not going to happen. How many turnovers did he finish with? Is it 8, 9? 8. 8 turnovers when your best players goes down. That's not how great teams are typically constructed. When one guy goes down, nobody's good enough to fill that in. You can't have that big of a weakness with your 2 best players. They should be able to step up for one another.
Jaylen Brown was an all-NBA player, and deservedly so, in the regular season. But you see what happens with him when the game has gotten in half court, and as you pointed out, Tatum not being at his best and clearly bothered by that ankle. How many times in this game do we see Jaylen Brown play careless basketball? I mean, twice in the fourth quarter or late in the game when this theoretically was so competitive. He has the play in the corner where he just goes left and it's just a free takeaway for Miami.
Yeah.
And the other one where he just doesn't feel Jimmy Butler coming on his hip and Jimmy pokes away and goes in and you immediately call a timeout. He made so many
and the 3 that I was that just got us here, which was just a pull-up 3 with like 15 seconds on the clock at one of the last possessions where they actually like realistically had a chance to get back in the game.
He had over half of his team's turnovers. Over half. Mm-hmm. He was not he is not in this game. And really, a lot of the series, not at the level you need to be if you're going to overcome a Tatum ankle injury and Tatum not showing up like he did in Game 7 against Philly. Like he just wasn't in it's Brenner. What I think really would bother me if I am Boston with Jaylen, what I think would really irk me if I'm looking at what he is. This is a guy that is going to be due a massive, massive contract here shortly. and in the biggest game of your season was careless with the ball over and over and over again.
I don't
and
think
not
he was
playing
careless
in
with the
smartest way
ball. I
possible.
think he can't dribble the ball in a way that a primary
But
offensive creator should be able to do. I just think I like that sounds so like awful, but it's like at a certain point, it's just true. He can't do that. It's a skill he doesn't have right now.
Yeah, and I think the other. Let me rephrase this then. I think that's a correct point. What Jalen is, or is not, maybe is a better way to put it. It feels like there is built-in limitations to how good your team, if he's going to be your clear number 2. He is not an all-ball creator. He is just not an apex on-ball creator. There are times where it works. There's times against smaller defenders and in the regular season and against poor defenses where he looks better at it.
Yeah,
I think we talked about on the show how his handle has looked better. But at times in this game, when Tatum had picked his spots, hits and threes and things, it worked. The second best on-ball creator for Boston in this game was Derek White. If Jaylen Brown is going to get this contract, if Jaylen Brown is an All-NBA guy and is all these things and is just worth every penny and stuff, like he can't be that. That is like just a really tough place to be for what he is. And if Jaylen is just a little, even just a margin, has four turnovers instead of 8, which 8, by the way, more than the other 4 starters combined. Just bad, over half. This feels like a game that could have been closer if there's just a little less sloppiness from Jaylen.
The question then is, right, like the reason I think you make the distinction that he can't rather than that he was just careless or made mistakes is that...
Look, and is can't, we should say, I think can't in these situations, I think like saying absolution in these things is like, I think always a little bit unfair, but I think it is like the context of like him doing it at this moment in the series, it doesn't feel like he can fully do it.
The reason that I feel comfortable going far enough to say can't is that this is exactly what happened in the finals last year. That's the reason that they already lost the series. It's just the scouting report on him. I mean, you pointed out how Jimmy was able to just, swipe it from him multiple times. And the reason that that's the case is because it's out. The book is out. So, yeah, can't maybe is a little bit aggressive. Whatever. I think the way that I put it a second ago is what's fair. He can't do it at the level that a secondary creator on a championship team needs to be able to do it. And that, I think, is fair. What I would say is it's such a symbol of just where their team is, because what I was going to ask you is like, well, if he didn't, if he had fewer turnovers, what's the other outcome? Because I think the other outcome is he took tons of shots as well. So it's not like he was always turning the ball over. He also took 10 more shots than anybody. And then it's like, well, then a lot of the time you would say, okay, well, even a simple, like draw a, one, what is it? One dribble and a good decision, right? That's like the cliche phrase that people use when you're just catching the ball and getting into the paint. Usually a simple pass is going to at least create some kind of opening. Well, even if we imagine a world where he's able to do that consistently, well, then their shooters are going to be the ones getting those shots. And that is a weakness of their team, is how reliant they already are on threes and how streaky their shooters can sometimes be and how much they leave themselves open to, did our threes go in? And so then it's like, well, then you're just kind of back to a different issue with this team. And I think, the contract is obviously going to have plenty of time to be sorted out. And you and I are going to talk about it plenty. But I think that is a valid thing to bring up, because it's like, it wasn't just limitations of Jalen. It's limitations of Jalen on this team. In this Celtics situation, is he balancing and giving you enough to complement what else is already there and complement Tatum? And I think this game with Tatum so hobbled and him not able to do that is just like the perfect encapsulation of why it's just not possible. Like he had that one lob to Robert Williams at one point, I think in the third quarter. And I was like, damn it. Like just, if you could just do that consistently, like that would be a perfect example of what you're talking about, of like, if he could just turn some of those into just something like 5-10% more beneficial to the team. But that's why I just feel like it's like, can't, because it's like, well, you've been in the league for so long. If you could do it, you'd be doing it in a spot like this.
Yeah, no, I think that is correct. We will do a Celtics autopsy at some point, because I think this is obviously a very pivotal summer for them. Any other Game 7 thoughts, Brendon, before we move on to the finals? The series as a whole, to me, was very just hard to predict, kind of all over the place. I didn't feel like there was a point where you texted me like, I think this is over. And I think in my heart and heart if I agreed, and I also was like, I wouldn't be surprised if Boston just like pulled some bullshit out of
they
the
kind of
pocket
did.
and just
They cut it back to like 15
yeah.
after that, and it felt like it might be interesting again. I do have one more thing. I think we should talk about Butler and Tatum a little bit more because you had texted me something while we were watching of Tatum's injury, and we were debating whether it's actually realistic that they could have benched him. And I think on the whole, he played well enough and he had enough spots where whether it was the 1-3 he made in a key moment or he was able to get to the mid-range pull-up once or twice, he was passing well, even if he wasn't actually creating offense for himself consistently. Like, as far as a guy with a sprained ankle goes, I think he gave you this was better than like James Harden with the hamstring stuff in that 2021 Brooklyn-Milwaukee series where Harden's just like camped out at the free throw line because he couldn't move. Like, this was not that. And I was disagreeing with you that they couldn't bench him. I was like, yes, you can if he's going to hurt your team. I don't know what the better option would have been because Brogdon was active in this one, but he didn't play well, and they went to Hauser, and like they didn't really have another guy. So maybe there was no way to do it. But the reason that I actually come down and end up agreeing with you is because Butler's ankle was fucked as well. Like, Butler also was playing on a bad ankle, and so you can't take like that like confidence pride hit of like that guy's doing 12 of 28 with 7 rebounds, 6 assists, and 28 points in a closeout game, but I'm going to hit the bench because I'm too hurt. But that's like such a game 7 thing that these guys were both just like on their absolute last gas, and somehow just like one guy had to do it, and he did, and now Miami won.
Yeah, I want to say something about Tatum. I don't come away from this series or these playoffs like really feeling any worse about Tatum in any way. I think there is some variance built into what he is and the way he plays that I think can be very frustrating. I think that is absolutely true. I also think the way that he played in Game 7 against Philly, I think down the stretch of Game 6 against Philly, the last couple games had some really big moments, and the toughness to play through that ankle tonight. I don't come away from this playoff run for Boston and it ending in a poor way thinking that's the guy that, like, you know, I'm unsure about that guy. There's obviously room for improvement. I think some tweaks to how he plays and the shot diet I think would serve him well in a playoff setting. And I think kind of build in some more variance to that Celtics offense. I think that's one of the things I would be looking at if I'm them to kind of retool for next season. But I don't come away from this playoffs really feeling weird about Tatum. I feel it's about, okay, like how do we best support Tatum going forward, and is Brown at the small GDP of another country the right way to do that?
Yeah, I don't feel any differently about Tatum, but I also don't feel better, which you would have made.
No, I don't feel better.
Right? Like, I mean, he still kind of needs to fill out the mid-level scoring and the passing, and that was what we said coming off of last year. So I feel like I would have liked to feel even better, even if they lost in the same way. Say they lose Game 7. Well, he hasn't really made me feel like, okay, he's 5% better than he was this time last year, which is a problem because he's also getting to the prime age like Brown is.
Yeah, and also next summer his money. Let me ask you a follow-up to that. Did you feel differently after Game 7 against Philly? Like, did you feel differently about him after that game?
I felt like it was a huge moment in terms of having the poise and especially with how many questions there are about like their togetherness and kind of like stick-to-itiveness. Just like after Game 5, it could have been over, and it wasn't. And he was the one who put them on their back in the fourth quarter of Game 6 and then all throughout Game 7. But basketball-wise, like the way he went about doing that, I know he can make pull-up threes over 7-footers that are slow.
Sure.
So it's like what he did against Joel Embiid to get to 51. I know that wasn't the only buckets he made, but like that was kind of the big thing. That's like, well, you've been doing that. You know what I mean? So obviously it's huge. Like he has the record for most points in a Game 7. Like I sound like an idiot criticizing it, but if you're asking me like long-term or building the team, I don't necessarily feel like, oh, he unlocked that. I don't think there's a thing you could say that about.
I think that's right. I think I think maybe if there's anything I do feel better about with Tatum is that I think that not shying away from taking on the responsibility after the way he started Game 6 and then that bleeding into that Game 7, I think reflects really well on him. And I think just playing through the ankle reflects on him. So like that would give me hope that it's like you adjust some of these things. And I think like it's funny because it's a couple of years ago there was like him talking about Kobe and that like there could just a little. I've kind of come back around on mid-range stuff, Brendan. Like I think it's just like a useful tool in your bag. As much as we fetishize 3-pointers and like it's rims and it's shots at the rim and it's threes and like that's like the modern shot diet, especially in the playoffs, there's such a need to play in the in-between space.
Yeah.
And draw fouls. And I think Tatum, if there's a thing that he, as well as Joe Mazzulla, orchestrating the offense and tweaking the formula for next year, that is where I would go for them. Like honestly, like it probably won't be fun for Tatum, but in addition to Kobe tape, maybe like watch some Jimmy Butler tape.
That's just cruel. You can't make
like,
him watch. Give him some MJ stuff, or there's better. There's more
I'll send
examples.
Well, if I won't. But if there's a world where someone could send like the commercial with NECA and Jimmy for like a Michelob, someone could send him, Jason, a cold Michelob, across the barn, be like, hey, watch some Jimmy tape. Maybe you one day too could own a very expensive coffee company and have Michelob ads.
Yes, I think any of those guys who have honestly started their game from the mid-range and actually rounded it out from there, he's in the opposite direction, but it's needed. We can get to the finals here.
Book would be another one that I would be like,
sure.
Book understand, but just Book is at that age and like they have a similar like ability to play different speeds, and I think he could just be like Book understands like the value of like those of the mid.
And that's the thing, is like Tatum has the footwork and the patience and kind of like
he has the size and he has the size.
Nobody's going to contest his shot if he actually has an approach to get to it.
Especially if they hunt switches and do the thing that teams do, which is like, hey, can we get a guard on him? And even if it's like a bulkier guard, he's big enough to pull up over those guys.
Exactly. Imagine him at like the extended post against Gabe Vincent in this series. But that's just like not something they could do. If they're going to post up a mismatch, it has to be Horford or Smart, because those are the only guys who actually have that game to them. But the last thing I was going to say here on the Celtics and just this game 7, because Derek White for a moment felt like he was going to be the savior again, and then you look at his box score and it's actually just sort of ordinary. But the way he's been able to help this team since they traded for him at the deadline last year should really be like it should show the Celtics front office the value of legitimate, like, connective real guards. You know what I mean? Not Brogdon, not Smart, but more guys like White. I'm not saying you have to trade those other two guys. I mean, I know it's easier said than done. Those are very good players, but that should be a lesson, that when White plays so well, they really look like a different team. That should carry over for them as they're building out their roster.
That is an archetype of player that I love, and I think even if you find a bargain version of that,
Peyton Pritchard.
Like I think of a. Well, the name I went to, that if I don't know what he's going to do, but if he ends up on the market this summer because he declines his player option, and I think if he ends up on a good team, I think like Dante DiVincenzo could be like that kind of, like that's the kind of archetype.
Sure.
Like the shooting's like a little bit less there, and he's maybe a little smaller, but that is like the template of like connector guy who like knows how to play and isn't going to hijack your shit. Mm-hmm. Like that guy would fit this. Like if a good team went and got him, I think he would help a lot of good. Like a lot of the good teams just need that kind of piece to make things work a little bit better.
You know who was the biggest winner of tonight's game?
The Miami Heat, because they made the fucking NBA Finals. Pat Riley.
Pat Riley's the coolest guy on the planet. Just nothing.
Do you think we're
guy in a suit?
Do you think we're gonna? If I'm Adrian Brody's agent right now, because Adrian Brody plays him on Winning Time.
Yep.
I am absolutely. Like, there's a writer's strike going on right now. Solidarity.
Season 2's coming, though. It's already done.
Yeah, it's already done. But I'm, like, already being like, hey, like, do you guys want to do, like, Pat Riley, like, with the Knicks as, like, a spinoff? Or, like, Adrian will dye his hair green. Like, you know, he'll dress like Miami.
Pepper.
Like, yeah. He'll do, like, Don. And we can do Don Miami era if you want to, you know?
I would be more than happy to watch Adrian Brody reenact every era of Pat Riley. Pat Riley, like, genuinely is one of those guys that there are fewer and fewer of because the league is getting older, but you could genuinely tell the story of basketball through Pat Riley. He was on the Knicks in the 60s, I think, or at the very least the 70s. And now he is still overseeing a team that is in the NBA Finals. So it's pretty damn cool. I don't know if you have one of these, Chris, but when I went to the Combine in 2019, I don't really maybe when I was first going to games, I got a little starstruck, but the Suns sucked so bad that I kind of just got used to it around guys who weren't intimidating. And then by the time the intimidating guys came around, I was just sort of, accustomed to be, okay, there's Chris Paul. Yeah. Not like it's nothing, but I'm not going to, cower in my boots about it. Pat Riley walking past, because the NBA Combine is just everybody's everywhere. There's no media is really restricted and there's no fans, so they don't have to be careful at all. They just walk around. Pat Riley walked by me and I got goosebumps. I was like, that's Pat Riley. I don't know why that guy of all guys, but he just looked, same exact way he looked on the TNT broadcast today, just in a suit, slicked back hair, and just looking as cool as can be and successful as hell. And I was like, okay, that did it for me. I finally had a, opening in the armor and he hit me.
That would be he would be high up on my list. If I was, he would be the one, I think. Cause I don't have that, the recent years of Phil Jackson kind of take that away from me.
I've never been close up like that with Michael Jordan, but I would imagine he is on that.
The closest thing I think I could say is that being at All-Star Weekend for NBA 75, I was an elevator adjacent to Kareem, and he was kind of in his own little thing, and that was very cool.
Also just taller than everybody, so that's another factor with Kareem. He just literally larger than life,
Yeah, and just seeing... And just seeing the various people, not even getting to interact with them or be close enough to them, but just seeing all these people, seeing LeBron and Michael talk. I was just what I would pay for a boom mic.
Well, the thing about Riley too is not to be, I would love to age as well as some of those guys, but others maybe less so. Whereas Pat Riley, it's he could just be alongside De Niro and Pacino and Heat 2 or something, and it would be just normal. He just looks like the coolest, most handsome dude, even though he's 80 years old. That's part of the intimidation factor that Pat Riley brings. He's I still am better at this than you. I still look better doing it, and I'm never quitting.
Michael Mann, all I ask is you just do that, please, for Heat 2. I cannot are you a Heat guy, Brendan?
So I watched Heat for the first time over the weekend. I had never seen it before.
We can't do this here because it's not, but we need to have a long conversation about this because that movie is incredibly important stuff.
So let me tell you who the real winner that I meant when I asked you that question before our Pat Riley derailment. The Miami Heat are obviously the biggest.
Adam Driver because he's going to be in Heat 2. Yeah. Austin Butler because he's going to be in Heat 2. That's the
So it's Miami Heat, then those two guys. So I guess my answer that I had is now number 4 on this ranking that we're coming up with on the fly. But no, the Denver Nuggets. These teams just beat the shit out of each other. Jimmy Butler can barely run up and down the court for 48 minutes, and the Nuggets were already going to be favorites before any of that even happened. Yeah. Even if the Heat swept the Celtics, the Nuggets were going to be favorites. Now they're even more a week of extra rest and a few battered and bruised guys later, and all of a sudden the Nuggets get to take the scattered remains of the Miami Heat on for 7 games. What's the best case scenario for Miami to be competitive in this series to you? What's the
best
blueprint?
Case for Miami? The blueprint is number 1 that they are able to grind this into a muck. Not that Denver can't succeed through the muck, because they can. They have Nikola Jokic. He is kind of muck-proof. But their thing is going to have to be to do what they've done pretty much every series since playoffs, which is make it really, really grimy, which is make it uncomfortable. And it's for Jimmy to, I think, really be prime Jimmy and foul hunt. And that ankle, I don't maybe it's just you take game 1 and you just kind of coast and you take that game and take the L, and then game 2 you kind of rev up a little bit. But Jimmy, if Jimmy is not just trying to draw 10, 12, 14 free throws a game, they're not going to win a game in this series. He has to, I think, be that and make Jokic uncomfortable in that way. That's the vulnerability. Sure. They're not exactly the perfect team to, I think, break that open, but Jimmy would be the path to do it. And then you got to get lucky with your role guys again. You need Robinson and Strus and Gabe Vincent and Caleb Martin and all these guys to show up and hit things, and then we'll see if Hero comes back. I don't totally know if Hero would be such an interesting wrinkle to this, Brendan, because they need the offensive punch. They need the shooting. They just need more offense, particularly if against Denver, if they want any shot.
Yeah.
But there's also just a change in quality that you will have if you don't have Hero. But I think this all starts with Jimmy. It's about Jimmy and how that goes from there. And obviously, we'll talk about it more, but the Bam Jokic component of this is going to be fascinating.
Yeah. So let's go back to the Jimmy and Jokic foul part of it, because you said it's not a perfect guy to do that. Maybe prime James Harden is the perfect guy to do that, but Jimmy is.
I mean, the perfect guy. There's two guys that come to mind, two formulas. I think it's prime LeBron, who's just downhill and could jump all the time, and then I think it's Durant. I think those are the two.
Well, Durant didn't do it, so.
But
that's where I was going to go. Is no one else has done this, and LeBron was the other. Obviously their last opponent, and this. I mean, it's come up as we've talked about the Nuggets all playoffs. I don't fully get why it is so hard for teams to try to exploit Denver defensively, and particularly Jokic. I think it's that the margin for error is so small that, again, you don't always have time to hunt Jokic when you just need a bucket. I would have liked the Boston matchup a little bit, because it would have been the first time Jokic would have had to guard on the perimeter with an actual 5-out team. He hasn't had to do that. A little bit against the Lakers, I guess you could say, but not in a real way. And then the Jimmy component is the other challenge that the Miami, now that we know that's who it is, could pose. And if there's anybody who's going to just try to junk it up and commit fully to that bit, I feel like it's Jimmy. And so some of it is just, you have to be trying to do it. You have to be committed to saying, we're going to exercise our advantages. And I don't think any team Denver has faced has actually been able to consistently say, you're going to play our game. You're going to respond to what we do. Maybe the Heat are not going to do that either. But that's part of what has to happen, is you can't just fall into their trap of up and down, letting them score, letting them get to what they want to do. And Jimmy, I think defensively is part of that too, because you have in our notes that he's going to be the guy to guard Murray. They also can be one of the only teams that has actually tried to switch the Jokic-Murray pick and roll consistently. And I think Jimmy defending Jokic, especially late in the clock, is something that could be interesting in the series too.
Yeah, I think the question just goes, how healthy is he?
Not very.
So, does he have that gear in him, or is he the meme come to life of him slumped over the side? Is that where he's at, just with the ankle, with his health, with his gas tank right now? I think that's very possible.
Well, that's why Hero would be so big,
minutes.
right? If they could just get 15 points a game from Hero, that would make such a difference.
Well, and someone else to initiate the offense and be in control of the flow. That would be a really big deal. Hero just doing that maybe gives Jimmy 10% more energy to do Jimmy Butler shit.
Yeah. So you mentioned how the Nuggets are just straight up more talented, and the Heat have been the less talented team in just about every series that they've been in. Maybe not the Knicks, but Miami had this.
Well,
yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. Heading into this game, Miami had the 6th best half-court offense in the playoffs and the 8th best transition offense. I don't know how that team is going to the finals, yet here we are, but I just don't know if they're going to be able to score enough to keep up with Denver. It just, all the stuff we said is going to matter, but just straight up point blank, I just don't know if they're going to be able to match if the games are in the 110s and 120s the way that Denver has played. I just don't think they can win that way. And can they really grime up 7 straight games against a team that's so polished like the Nuggets? The one thing that the Heat do have is they're plus 23 in the clutch in the playoffs.
Sure.
Denver's plus 9, so it's not like they've been bad. Boston was -2. So, that's part of why Miami won this series. But is that even enough of an advantage over the Nuggets? Like, I don't really know of any offensive pathway for the Heat to like say we're going to own this series on the offensive end. I don't see a portion unless it really is just, Jimmy with 20 free throws a game.
Brennan, here's the answer. There's not an offensive pathway. It's not. I don't think it's. I think it's beyond. I don't know if there is one. There isn't one.
Yeah.
They are not built to get in to. Like, Nikola Jokic loves the ponies. Definitely was probably watching ponies instead of watching this game. Mm-hmm. They don't have the ponies to keep up with Jokic. They don't. Like, there's just no. Even if Hero comes back and is right and his cardio isn't affected in a meaningful way, they're just not going to keep up. It's just not going to happen. Like, there's just not a pathway for Miami to compete with Denver in that way. They have like one very narrow path to victory. They've won, and it's the muck. It is Jimmy. And it is good enough defense, and just you hope to God that some of the shooting for Denver breaks the other way. That's it, and that's the path.
So, as we've been doing this more, I obviously think about what I'm going to say ahead of time. How long ago did you come up with the ponies thing?
On the spot.
Wow, that's impressive. It sounded rehearsed, but I had to check. That's good stuff.
No, this was not a Chris Manning. This was not a Chris Manning preps himself for lines. This was Chris Manning on the fly. Brendan, we have already got a Tyler Hero update.
Okay.
Chris Haynes has reported that Miami Heat guard Tyler Hero is ramping up workouts and is expected to make his return at some point during the NBA Finals, with Game 3 being the likely target.
That's tough. They got to win one of those first two, otherwise Tyler's going to be in hell mentally going into that game. They lose the first two, and then it's like, hey, buddy, go win us a game. Welcome back. Score 20 for us, brother.
And it's like, do they win game 2? Because like I think Denver's probably rolling in game 1.
Yeah.
This is at altitude. They've been off. They are healthy. The Heat are banged up, and Jimmy. So okay, let me run through the minutes.
So that's nice for the Heat still, but.
You're going altitude kind of wipes some of that away, sure. Man. Here's the minute totals for the guys who played for the Heat on Monday night. Jimmy played 43, played 47 the previous game, I think, right? Mm-hmm. Or something close to that. Caleb Martin played 45, just a light 45 for Caleb Martin. Bam played 43, Gabe Vincent played 26, Strus played 28, Duncan Robinson played 20, Highsmith played 9, and Lowry played 24. Kevin Love is just out of the rotation. Cody Zeller is just out of the rotation. And their main guys are just playing 40-plus minutes a night. Here we are, Miami. Jimmy, like 3 days, Jimmy better already be. Jimmy should do his post-game meet availability, have like one beverage, and then just like it's those massive like compression boots. Mm-hmm. Those are on the plane to get you to Denver.
Yeah.
A lot of massage, a lot of Theragun, like just some kind of massage gun.
Like Theragun that Dwayne Dedmon threw onto the court earlier this season.
that should be at the Hall of Fame. If
they beat Denver, it's its own exhibit at that point.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, and I think you're right that Denver will probably just spank them in game 1. I think that you and I think, are on the same page that this could wrap up pretty quickly as a series. Might be entertaining. We don't know. I'm not saying the games won't be close, but, we seem to be aligned there. But let's talk about Bam, because I think, a pathway for the Heat to win includes an otherworldly performance from him. I think they're going to have to double Jokic. Unless they're crazy enough to try Jimmy against him or Kevin Love, or I don't even think they have. They don't have the horses for. They don't have the ponies for that, like you said.
Very happy for Kevin Love that now every time he has made the NBA final, made the playoffs, he's made the finals. Good for him. He's not going to factor into the series in the way he did in the Cleveland series. Like, he's just not.
No, because he also can't guard Jeff Green. Which is also like a sneaky thing that the Heat kind of don't have an answer for. It's like Jeff Green at the 5 in the second unit. It's like they just really don't match up with this team very well.
Really happy for Jeff Green. Big Jeff Green fan. Brendan, here are Nikola Jokic's numbers against the Miami Heat in the regular season this year. I don't know if you played around with this. StatHead has this new versus feature, and you can do specifically versus teams and seasons. I've wasted a lot of time on this.
Honestly, salute to them for pulling that off, because the NBA.com one sucks. So
Yeah, StatHead's great. It's worth your money. Okay, 35 minutes across 2 games, 23 points a game, 10 assists, 12 boards. Shot 69.2% on twos.
Good grief.
Yeah, good grief is a really true shooting percentage of 74.8%. He took 4 free throws. Didn't even have to take free throws, and he just like walking into 23, 12, and 10.
Yeah, he's gonna average a triple double in this series, and
He is
like,
oh my goodness.
when I don't know when the NBA media, like NBA PR, decides on the panel of voters for Finals MVP, but they should just announce the panel and Jokic getting Finals MVP at the same time. Like, here's who's voting. We've received their votes. It's Jokic. The games will be aired starting Thursday. Enjoy the series, but we're gonna ruin it for you. Like, spoiler alert.
Yeah, the script writers can like put that one in ink, as the kids would say. So the Bam part of this, I want to start with the offensive side for Bam.
Okay.
Because I think he has to. If Jokic is probably, I would assume Jokic is going to guard him, right?
Yeah.
So what does that look like? He in the late part of that Celtics series, I think looked often very lost on offense to me. He would when they did the thing that they started doing where he dribble up the ball, he would look for. That he wouldn't really pass. He just sometimes take like a pull-up jumper, like 18 seconds. I didn't understand what that was going for. There was no.
He has a little bit of Jaylen Brown syndrome, and I think he gets a little nervous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he tries really hard. He's willing to drive. He's willing to bang and go at guys. He's smaller than Jokic. Jokic isn't like an elite rim protector by any means, but like he's big enough and strong enough to like put his arms up and move.
Sure.
Like that's not going to be a big option for Bam. He's not going to be able to like out offensive rebound him and annoy him in that way. He's not going to get in Jokic's head in the way he can with other guys. He had 7 assists, but Bam defensively is going to be in for like a real big challenge however long he's on Jokic and how that looks for Miami and his responsibilities in the zone, which there's a point about the zone we need to hit as well because I sent you that during the game from Matt Moore. Bam on offense can't just feel like he's a nothing, and to me he felt like he was a nothing for much of this series. And if he plays like he did against Boston on offense, there's no path. Like we talked about the Jimmy part of it. If Bam isn't providing you actual offensive value, Miami can't win this series.
So yes, I think defensively, to get that out of the way quickly, I feel like Bam is sneaky strong, but Jokic is just another level. Nobody's gonna physically match Jokic enough to stop him from what he's trying to do. And so I think Bam's maybe stronger than he has been in previous series when he was getting exposed by, let's say, Giannis or whatever you want to point to. I think Bam's a better player defensively even than he was prior. I also think he's a more steady guy. So some of the like the late game block that he had in game 6, that's a huge play that you just have to kind of stick out your struggles and just make. And he did. And he's had big rebounds and different things like that. Offensively, what I think they have to do is use him as a facilitator. I think that they have to have him, at the top of the key or at the elbow and playing in the dribble handoff game or, picking out shooters, maybe even in the short roll, although Denver's used to that. They know how to kind of respond to that. They know how to collapse the help and get the ball out of that guy's hands or make him take a tough shot. It's what the Suns try to do with Ayton. It's what all teams know they need to try to do because Jokic is going to come up in the pick and roll. It's not rocket science. The Nuggets will be ready. So I actually think just putting the ball in Bam's hands from the jump is probably the best. But then you're sort of taking one of your best interior scorers out of the picture. And we were talking about foul trouble and trying to put pressure on Jokic. That's not doing that. And so the best way to maximize Bam might actually be the worst way to attack Denver in a way, because we know Bam isn't going to be able to score one-on-one. I mean, the way that Horford was able to swallow up Bam at times, Jokic can do that. Hey, stand there and this guy's going to kind of bumble around and you just have to not foul him and not make a mistake. And most likely he'll take a tough shot or turn it over. Like Jokic can execute that. So it feels like Bam is a little bit of a man without a mission here in this series offensively, unless he can just have like an otherworldly playmaking series.
And I think he's going to go. I think he's going to get put through the ringer. in this. I think this is gonna be a tough series for us on the bandwagon.
Yeah, well, you said he was bad this series, or like not consistently effective. I mean, we had a whole fawning over Bam session like after game 2 or 3. So I mean, I think he was good in their wins and bad in their losses. I mean, like a lot of guys.
It's just offensively, he looks like kind of like rudderless right now. Like I think he just, you see how it is very hard for bigs, unless you're like Jokic or Embiid. It's just really hard for bigs out here. We saw that with Anthony Davis and Bam just being the second best player on Miami's team. Mm-hmm. I mean, or if he's third, if Caleb Martin's actually first. But like, it's just hard, and it's like you're seeing all that. And it's like
the Evan Mobley thing, right? I mean, it's the same exact thing. If you can't dribble as a big man and you can't shoot threes, what are you?
Yeah,
in 2023.
Tune into Locked On Cavs on Friday, the other show I host, where Brendan will be talking about Evan Mobley, and Jake produces that one too, and he can't even dig me because it's a show about the Cavs, and I shouldn't be dinged for this either because Brendan brought it up. Brendan, we have a line for the series for at least game 1.
All right.
Full game lines for friends at BetMGM. The Nuggets are 7.5-point favorites. Minus 350 money line. Over under for points set at 219.5.
I would take 7.5 now because it's going to go further in Denver's direction. In my professional opinion. You and I both have futures on Denver, so we should just tell everybody that now. And, let the chips fall.
We got some more. We got some more odds from BetMGM. Okay. Here we go. Nuggets are minus 400. Heat are plus 300 to win.
In the series or the game?
In the series.
Okay. Yeah.
Jokic minus 300 to win MVP. Butler's plus 350. Murray is plus 1,200. Bam is plus 4,000. Caleb Martin plus 5,000. MPJ, Aaron Gordon, Bruce Brown, and Strus are all somewhere between plus 20,000 and plus 25,000.
Yeah, don't bet any other Nugget besides Jokic.
Yeah. Series length. Series final result. Correct series result. Denver 4-0 plus 550. Denver 4-1 plus 230. That's, I think, where I would go. Denver 4-2 plus 450. Denver 4-3 plus 325. Heat 4-3 plus 850. Heat 4-2 plus 700. Heat 4-1 plus 2,000. And a Heat sweep plus 4,000.
Good stuff.
Plus 4,000, not minus 4,000. Plus 4,000.
I think you said.
Okay, plus. I panicked for a second because if I said minus 4,000 Heat sweep, that would be insane, and it's plus 4,000.
No, I mean to wrap a bow on this and the Bam thing, like, again, dude is about to turn 26. It's okay, but I think this playoff series has shown that, or this playoff run, even when he's been good, I think has shown the handle's the thing for him, and Draymond's always been the comp. Draymond can dribble the ball,
and he
can dribble the ball, in transition. He can occupy and not turn it over when he needs to as a facilitator, and he is a smart passer who makes good decisions, which Bam has that, but you just got to round out the game. And I think this series will be even more so than the Lakers series was for Bam, where he actually kind of fit in really well. This one will probably be one where it's like, all right, like, not back to the drawing board, but like, if he does struggle, I think it'll be cool to see kind of how he reacts. But we might be getting too far down because we have not watched this series yet. But it's going to be a fun matchup with those two guys, and how the Nuggets try to guard Jimmy too, like we talked about. I don't really know. And probably Gordon to start, but Bruce Brown might get a shot at it, and those guys have a history. It'll be fun.
Yeah. All right. Let's make some picks on this series and get out of here. Brendan, we should note, friend of the program. I'm just claiming him as friend of the program. Matt Moore had a tweet that the Nuggets are the best team in the regular season and the postseason against zone defenses. What does Miami do to really muck things up and rely on defensively? Zone defense.
Yeah. Yeah, in this series, I think what they'll do is swarm Jokic and hope to God that the shooters miss. I think that'll be what we see, and I don't know how sound of a strategy that's going to be. My prediction's 4-1. Nuggets in 5.
Same. I'm there. I think Jokic is going to win Finals MVP. I think he's going to average a triple double, and I think Denver is going to win this in pretty dominant fashion.
Is it going to be
I think
fun?
There's going to be like.
What's your prediction on that?
Yes.
Are we going to like it?
I think it's going to be. I think I'm going to like it because there's certain things that I think we're going to get at least like some Jimmy bullshit that I love. and I think we're going to get just amazing. I think Brendan, here's why this is going to be a fun finals. We're going to get to see Nikola Jokic on the biggest stage in basketball. We're going to get to celebrate Nikola Jokic's greatness. We're going to get to see him do just wizardry shit over and over and over again. We are going to get to see Nikola Jokic go and take the crown of being the best player alive, being the best player in the NBA right now, win a title, take something that people say he hasn't done, win at the highest level. He's going to get to take that and say, you can't say that about me anymore. I just won a title. His resume and his abilities for anyone being rational will be bulletproof after this series. That is why this is going to be fun. This is Nikola Jokic celebration season. And you'll feel for Jamal Murray. I'm sure we'll get some fun Jimmy Butler stuff. I'm sure Mike Malone's going to talk a ton of crap this whole series, and it's going to be hilarious. But this is about Jokic and further crowning him as the best player we have in this league.
Well said. I hope that the subsequent special features about Jokic focus on something besides him being fat, which is what ESPN started with. So we shall see how they cover all of that. You want to do some coaching stuff?
Yeah, I do hope Taco Bell brings back the quesarito for the finals, and Jokic gets a big bag as a result of it.
If they're doing it, they gotta bust it out soon, because otherwise.
Yeah, let's go. I mean, let's bring it into production. All right, let's talk about coaches. So Adrian Griffin, I want to, on a serious note with him, there have been, I think, just to say it, he was at one point accused of domestic violence. He countersued his former partner. They settled out of court. Players around the league, it seems like, very much vouch for him, but there is that part of his background that I think slowed where he was in 2020. He was accused of public domestic abuse by his former wife, Audrey Sterling. The Raptors did not take any action. He then abandoned a libel suit against her in 2021. So that is part of, I think, his process of getting here. It doesn't seem like it obviously has not had any real effect and repercussions, and
nothing substantive to go off of. It's a big question mark. It's a big mystery, and I don't really know how much is out there about it. I don't know how much a team. It's a weird gray area. I don't know how much a team could know. There's just a real gap in what we're able to understand about it, and
Bingo. Teams
are always able to fall back on that, for better or worse. We don't know. And that's not me cloudedly saying that it's a negative. It's just a big question mark. But Giannis liked him.
Giannis liked him, and it seems like players in Toronto loved him. It seems like players around the league and his other stops have loved him. And
finalists in Chicago, right, when they hired Billy Donovan?
Yeah, and he interviewed for a couple other jobs, I believe it was before that as well, and was in the running, I think, for another job this cycle. But, Brendan, let's start. I want to start by comparing this to other big at-stake hires, is where I want to start with this. Because there is a lot at stake here. What is at stake for this hire, I think, is nailing it for the Bucks and continuing to satisfy Giannis, make him feel like this is a place you can continue building, that even with some personnel stuff, that you have the right coach to help transition you to what is going to come next in this era of Giannis in Milwaukee. That is, I think, largely what's at stake. It's a little more complicated than that, and when you dive into the personnel stuff, but from like a purely coaching hire, this is what that coaching hire is. It has to help you win right now, and I think help you bridge something is what's to come. Here are some recent big hires that I think that were high pressure, that came at really big transition moments for franchises trying to get to the highest level. You had the Nets' Big Three era. They get Kenny Atkinson out of there, and they bring in Steve Nash. And Steve Nash was entirely in over his head. You have Darvin Ham with the Lakers after they felt they needed to move on from Frank Vogel. You have Nick Nurse in Toronto. Toronto obviously hits that wall several times with Dwayne Casey. They go with Nurse. They do the quiet trade. It works out. The Cavs get LeBron back. Obviously, David Blatt was hired before LeBron comes back, but David Blatt is their head coach when LeBron comes back. And also that was supposed to like shepherd the next era of Kyrie Irving and Andrew Wiggins and Deion Waiters, and I don't think David Blatt would have succeeded at that either. In retrospect, Willie Green in New Orleans with Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram, and the pressure to get past what did not work in the Stan Van Gundy trial run. And then Nick, now we'll talk about him briefly at the end, but Nick Nurse again now in Philadelphia, I think is on this list as well.
Yeah.
So Nick Nurse in a very different situation than he was in Toronto, but another high pressure situation.
Do you have a Nick Nurse hat? By the way, you have the merch.
No, he just seems I would buy Pat Riley merch though.
Nick Nurse logo is kind of whack, so just make better merch, and maybe I'll.
I'm
buy it.
I'm going to be honest. I'm not the biggest. I'm much lower on Nick Nurse than I was like when they won the title. Yeah.
Daryl Morey, not so much.
I think. Well, connects back to the Rio Grande Vipers in the G League.
I forgot about that. That's true.
It all goes back to Houston, Brendan. It's all about the Rockets. Maybe Diggers can be like, James, you know what I love? I love the city of Houston too. We can enjoy it together on road trips once a year.
Because you are staying here, so that I made the right decision with my job.
So I can turn. Can you imagine James Harden playing 40 minutes a game for Nick Nurse? Incredible. But I think the best comp for Adrian Griffin is Darvin Ham.
Mm-hmm.
This is a well thought of assistant with pedigree with players. Remember, Darvin Ham was beloved by Giannis. Darvin Ham has talked about how Giannis has talked about how they miss Darvin Ham. Mm-hmm. They went for an assistant who has new ideas, who maybe is going to take some time to adjust, who is going to take some time to grow into the role. But what we saw with Darvin Ham is that where he was in Game 1 was a very different place than where he ended up as a coach in the playoffs. He did a good job with that with a better roster, sure. But when he got to the playoffs, made a lot of the right lever pulls, was not afraid to sit guys, was not afraid to go away from certain things that weren't working and ride certain things. And I think that is the right approach. We cannot always project exactly how these things are going to work. It is very hard. I think it's really hard for these teams to always know, right?
Sure.
A lot of these coaching hires will not work. This one might not work. It's possible. But I think if you're going to move on from a guy that you've had a lot of success with, I think going for a former player who players respect, who seems like who is willing to evolve with the game and try different things, and has just been part of the ecosystem of the NBA for a long time, who can adjust some of what you do, but maybe won't try to reinvent the wheel. And you're not chasing something super flashy. You didn't go get Doc Rivers because he's the biggest name on the market. You did interview Nick Nurse, but you went in this different direction. You didn't do what the Nets did, which is their original sin, which was hiring Steve Nash.
Got too cute.
That was the first mistake there. Got way too cute. Way too cute. Adrian Griffin feels like it's in this mold of a thing that the logic behind it and how you say, okay, we're going to get someone new who can come in and do some of what we probably already did and been really successful, but help us evolve and provide this new perspective. That's a really strong formula to me if you're approaching this coaching hire.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the Willie Green one is one of the ones that sticks out to me personally. I don't think the Adrian Griffin one is necessarily similar, but it's kind of this other form of pressure where it's a very real form of pressure in today's NBA, right? Where it's like you have to keep these guys happy, and that means different things depending on the day, Keep Zion healthy, manage the workload that he's undergoing, work with the training staff. Oh, but also don't make him too mad that he doesn't get to play or doesn't get to play the way he wants to. And then you have to get him to play better defense because he hasn't been doing that. And it's a hard thing to do. But I think Willie Green, the team, his assist percentage was as high as it's ever been this year, Zion, as was all the defensive stats that he's had. And I think he had some decent moments defensively, especially just sort of in isolation and kind of executing what was being asked of him. And on top of that, I think Willie Green's gotten the most out of their whole young supporting cast. So it's another example of a former player, well-respected, carved a path through the Golden State staff and the Phoenix staff. The time was there. The team did sort of hire him ahead of schedule. I mean, he had 1 year where he was a high-profile assistant, and then they just snatched him up when the Suns were about to go to the finals. And it's worked. And so I just feel like this is definitely a trend. No matter what point in the process that your team is in, it seems to be that the players responded well to it, and management is increasingly kind of opening its eyes to the fact that hey, these guys bring something that is valuable and can work and is fresh in a way that maybe we need to be. And I don't know if that's part of the changing of the guard with the generations of players kind of flip-flopping over, and now just some different things are going to happen, and the guys that maybe a LeBron would have looked up to, I'd love to be coached by Tom Izzo or whatever, is different than what, a Zion would care about. But it seems pretty clear that change is coming, because cycle after cycle the past couple of years, it's been young former players getting these jobs no matter how high stakes it might be.
And I think, Brennan, if there's a through line, like, because these are not like obviously the highest, like maybe the highest level, the two highest level players we have as former coaches, unless I'm forgetting someone, are Chauncey Billups and then Steve Nash and Jason Kidd.
Yeah.
Those are some of the worst coaches we had or have.
I wasn't ready for how blunt that was, but you're not wrong.
I'm like, no, like.
No, I was just kind of following your point, and then it just was like a sledgehammer to those dudes, which I get.
Like Chauncey Billups, like the easiest layup in the NBA to me this summer that was just not taken. Like it was Ben Simmons at the freaking rim, like against Atlanta, was just Portland should have gotten rid of Chauncey Billups. Just said we need like an actual competent coach if we're going to keep doing this, because that's just he's a bad coach. That roster's not great either.
But that hire actually fits this, like you're saying, because they had a lot of pressure to keep Dame happy, and you can bet that the only reason that man still has his job is because they would still like to keep Dame happy.
They just did it in the wrong. They did that in the wrong way, I think, is what I would look at and say.
I mean, let's see what Billups does with a good coach, with a good team.
Okay,
that's fair.
But he's hired. He is an assist. His journey to being a head coach is not like a decades-long grind like it was for some of these other guys, where like they're ingrained. Like the through line of these guys that are succeeding as former players, assistants turned head coaches are guys that are ingrained in the modern NBA, that can talk to guys because they play in the league, but also understand the nuances of what is going on in modern basketball and where the game is evolving to and what things to pull. Yep. Chauncey Billups is like a relative newbie as a coach because he started as an assistant coach in 2020 with the Clippers under Ty Lue. Before that, he almost ended up as a president of basketball operations with the Cavs because Dan Gilbert liked him. Mm-hmm. Like that, like he is compared to a lot of these other guys. He's just starting.
Yeah.
He probably shouldn't have been a head coach that soon if he wanted to be a successful.
No, he's very similar to Kidd the first time around, or Derek Fisher with the Knicks, right?
Derek Fisher is another great example. Should not have just been thrown into that, and probably also shouldn't have ended up running the LA Sparks.
Well, what's interesting to me about this, you're right about both of those things with Derek Fisher. I don't think he's proven himself to be a good basketball coach. But the three guys with the longest tenures in the league, who are also probably the three guys who we would think of as the best coaches, all were unorthodox hires who got their shot and never let it go. Yeah, Pop, Spo, and Kerr.
Yeah.
Pop that was his first head coaching opportunity. He was not by any means like the youngest dude ever, but it was his first time, and he was bringing new ideas and this and that. Spoelstra, very criticized, very young, very out of the box, and then Steve Kerr came from TV and the front office and was not that altogether different from somebody like Derek Fisher or Jason Kidd, although he obviously had run a team. But those guys, those teams took a shot and they benefited from it. And so it's like, even if you look back really far in history, it tells us that tends to be the best way to do it. You do not get a lot of guys. I guess Michael Malone would be one exception here, where on their second or third shot, maybe Mike Brown can become that in Sacramento. They all of a sudden put together their best teams and their best approach as coaches. I mean, it happens, but most of the time, the best guys are just hired because a team rolls the dice on somebody they really believe in and commits to them.
The other name I would put in like this camp of the trend we're kind of hitting on, I think has to be Ty Lue. Ty Lue, journeyman player, is best known as a player for AI stepping over him in a finals game. That is his like most memorable on-court thing. Starts his coaching journey in 2009. He is named. Well, Wikipedia has two different dates here, so it's either 2009 or 2011. Regardless, he works for Boston, joins the Clippers coaching staff in 2013. So he's an assistant and in the flow of things after a long career, so he's bleeds one or the other. He ends up as the associate head coach on the Cavs in 2014. He's then, when Blatt is fired, he is made the head coach in January of 2016. But there was a path for him to grind his way up and learn stuff and prove himself to be sharp and get experience. He isn't just thrown into this stuff. And I like, for me, for my money, I think it's like, if I want to have a coach for the next 5 years to like lead my team to a title, it's him and Spo. Those are my two guys that I would be trying to pick between. Those are, to me, the best two coaches in the league for the most part.
Yeah, and you want to talk about pressure. What Ty Lue walked into was about as intense as it could possibly be.
And it's like you learn about his like personal life a little bit as well, and like some of the things going on. And it's like, I think that guy's just made of hard stuff. I don't know if you also saw the Spo quote from before Game 7.
Which one? No, I don't.
But basically said, like, to paraphrase it, I'm gonna try to find it real quick. But he had this quote that was like, "These moments aren't for everyone, but neither are we." Like these big pressure moments, and it's like that guy is just like, you have to be made of like a certain like chutzpah, have a certain thing to it. And I think it has to be.
He legitimately was ready to fight one of his players within the past 12 months on an NBA court. Not like he was really gonna do it, but he was
Brendon,
gonna do it.
Name the player.
Jimmy Butler, who half
Jimmy
of the league wouldn't even want to get in that guy's grill. Only one Celtic wanted to, Grant Williams.
The Minnesota Timberwolves like lost as a franchise because Jimmy Butler just punked them so damn hard.
And Eric Spoelstra, was like 50, was like, yeah, what? Let's do it.
Yeah, but that's another guy. He's like, we hit on this. He grinded and like understands like how the NBA works. Like even like Dick Nurse, who I'm a little bit lower on. Like that guy is just like a basketball journeyman. He was coaching in the G League. He was on Dwayne Casey's staff. He's bouncing around everywhere.
He's 55.
Like you learn and get better.
Which I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Older than you would think.
Yeah, but like you when guys actually go through that process of going to different places and expanding their knowledge and working in the game and aren't just like fast forwarded to like, hey, former player, let's hire him, you were better off for it. Like Nash, it's like, what did he really do in Golden State? I don't know. I can't explain to you what he did that like was applicable to him being an NBA head coach, other than the fact that he's Steve Nash.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what Chauncey Billups would like. That path was 2 years.
That distinction you're making is actually a really good one because I think you and I are aligned on the approach that teams should maybe have, but I think that there is a difference between hire an innovative or creative, like try to kind of think outside the box in order to get somebody who has never done the job versus giving somebody an opportunity when they've earned it, but maybe aren't getting the attention elsewhere. Like Mark Daigneault, another good example. We don't know what he's going to be. He wasn't a former player by any means, but did the work as an assistant and seemed to be somebody that the Thunder front office just really responded to well. And he had a really good first year in Oklahoma, or I think this is his second year in Oklahoma City, but he had a great year this year.
I would put Chris Finch in that category as well. This is a guy that played in England with the Sheffield Foragers in the second tier of British basketball as a pro. Coaches there until 2003, bounces around, ends up in the G League, and then goes Houston for 5 years, Denver Nuggets associate head coach, New Orleans Pelicans associate head coach, to Raptors assistant, gets the Wolves job.
Yeah.
Goes around and learns the craft. And like was for like, I felt like for 3 years, Brendon, every time I would read an article, I really miss the old Arnovitz column, I know you do as well, where they talk about the next head coaching hires, you would be like, oh, this guy has the sets. Yeah. That like a lot of teams steal from and really respect. He's going to be a head coach someday. Like that's the kind of experience that gets you to a certain place.
And one thing I would not advocate for on the Chris Finch side of things is Gerson Rosas playing the Matson and Nurse being the Tom and just sort of being propped up and installed out of nowhere. That wasn't, or not Nurse, Finch being the Tom and installed out of nowhere. They did them dirty. They did the Minnesota search a little bit improperly.
Do we think Gerson? Do we think Gerson Rojas like sent Chris Finch like vials of his own blood?
I think that we should avoid conversation about what Gerson Rosas did from an HR standpoint before we get into some trouble here. But I think you wanted to end with the Suns here, and I think it fits the trend because I think they're going to hire Kevin Young.
Okay, let's do that, and then I want to ask you about Nurse and Philly because I just think that is like Nurse coaching Joel Embiid is just like a wild sentence to consider.
Well, so we can do Nurse. I mean, what makes you think it's
so
crazy?
I want to hit. It is just like this is all I really have to say about it, and then I do want to hit you on the Phoenix thing. You are betting on Nick Nurse being able to adjust what he was doing the last several years in Toronto to do with Embiid, and that he has like other tricks in his playbook.
From what standpoint? Offense, defense, minutes?
Minutes, and look at the personnel he was playing at the end like the last couple years in Toronto. Like they didn't have there's not really any centers like Embiid, but he's like, what if I just don't really play big centers? What if we just like press enter this? Like they are the closest thing we have.
Masai? I mean, the roster didn't who did he have? Then they traded for Poeltl, and obviously he didn't bench Jakob Poeltl.
Yeah, okay. But I just think I think just like from what we know, what he did with Toronto in the finals Kawhi year to this next version, that just doesn't translate 1-to-1 onto what Philly is, even with the roster reshuffle. I just think that's going to look different, and how he adjusts to that, I think, will just be really fascinating. That's all. I think that is just worth monitoring in that ecosystem.
I think it's surprising and that they would kind of lean defense in this hire, because I don't necessarily feel like defense is their issue. I mean, they have a roster that can win a championship in Philly, so I don't really know if offense or defense, it's not really about that. It's just about like, can everybody get their head on straight and play committed basketball and not get hurt for more than, 2 series. But he's always built really good staffs, Nick Nurse. So I would imagine that, that ownership group spends, and Daryl Morey, tends to have carte blanche to do what he wants. So I think they'll assemble a staff, and maybe it's at least more creative, I think, than whatever Doc Rivers was doing. At least Nurse has that reputation. From the Suns side of things, I think it's a perfect example, and that's part of why my head has been kind of in this place for the past week or so. Is I said the day that Monty Williams got fired that I thought Kevin Young was a legitimate candidate here. He has Devin Booker's backing. It's not common for a high-level associate head coach type guy to be the person who works out the superstar player pregame or post-practice or during practice or anything, and Kevin Young and Devin Booker have always had that, so similar to the Giannis thing with Adrian Griffin. And Young is another guy who's worked his way up. He was a head coach in the D-League. He actually worked for Nick Nurse and then eventually replaced Nick Nurse at one point, and has had these sort of innovative philosophies, has interviewed for jobs dating back all the way to 2020 when he actually was a candidate to replace Brett Brown in Philly. And then now he's getting his chance. Like, I think that's kind of the path. He's not a former player. He's a little bit on the younger side maybe than some of these other guys, but I think that's what a team like the Suns should be trying to do, because what you have to do with the top-heavy roster is get creative and be innovative and try to figure things out, get more than the sum of its parts. So one guy that I don't think we talked about enough, or not we, like the basketball universe, is leaving out of these conversations. Why the hell does Sam Cassell not have a head coaching job? He checks every single box we've talked about right here, and he's not even getting like legitimate interviews, it seems like.
That's who Portland should have hired when they hired Chauncey Billups.
Yeah, you're probably right. It just seems like he has everything you would want.
He seems like a slam dunk as a hire.
I don't get it. Let's start a basketball team and hire Sam Cassell, you and me.
Yeah. We need we'll need some money.
I mean, we could do like a YMCA team and see if he's available. I didn't say an NBA squad. I just
Sam, give you a 6-pack of local beer cold and a sandwich.
We have some homage T-shirts we could probably hook him up with.
Yeah, I'm glad we both. But there's a certain player on one of the shirts we're getting from our friends at Homage that I'm glad
aged well. Yeah, tonight could have gone either way.
would have been
a rough look.
Would have been tough. Brendan, I meant to do this at the top of the show, but I want to end on a bit of trivia. If you can, I'm going to ask you one Sun question while I pull up what I was going to ask you trivia wise. You would just have a better read on this than me? Are you surprised the Suns didn't go outside the organization for their coaching hire?
I'm not surprised they didn't go outside the organization, just because I think Kevin Young would have been a candidate. He was a candidate elsewhere. So it's like you happened to I don't think Kevin Young is like settling because they didn't get the other guys. I think they just happen to have one of the better up-and-coming assistants already on staff, and so they went ahead and seemingly, that's not official yet, but seems like they're going to hire him. Bill Simmons has just said it outright multiple times, so I feel like it's happening. But they did interview Jordi Fernandez, who's another one of these guys, not a former player in the NBA, but
has like been G League to being like the architect of that Kings offense. Yeah,
exactly. So I think if they had gone and hired like Mark Bryant, who's like their big man whisperer, who used to work for the Thunder and like got a bunch of attention for developing Steven Adams and DeAndre Ayton and whatnot, and they're just like, he's our head coach now, then I would have raised my eyebrows a little bit. But Kevin Young's just one of the guys that he was due. I mean, it's kind of the same as if, the Sixers hired Cassell or something. Like, well, it's not. Well, he's with the Sixers now, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have been like a shock. Okay, they're in organization, but it's still a guy who is ready for that role. But
yeah. All right, here's the trivia question. Brianna Stewart has scored 78 points in her first 3 games with the New York Liberty. Who held the previous record for most points in their first 3 games for the Liberty before Brianna Stewart broke the record?
Tina Charles?
Tina Charles, that's correct. As a follow-up, this is not going to be Tina Charles. That's why I'm asking this. She also has with 66 points over 2 games, the most points across a 2-game span for the Liberty history. Who before her had the most points over a 2-game span?
I think this is maybe cheating because I think I might have seen this one, but is it Cappie Pondexter?
It's Cappie Pondexter. I mean, this is just from a WNBA Liberty Instagram
Cappie
post.
Pondexter.
That's where I pulled this one.
Is like the best YouTube deep dive in WNBA history. Like, she's just, Allen Iverson or whatever, just like playground basketball, like small guard you want to point to. Like Isaiah Thomas, whoever. Cappie Pondexter is on that list and just like never gets discussed in WNBA, in basketball circles, period. Like, she just kind of got forgotten. She came through Phoenix, so I have a soft spot, but yeah, she's awesome.
Stewie's also pretty awesome. Seems
Accurate.
like Brianna Stewart's pretty good at basketball. Let's end there.
Yeah, it's a
We have an NBA Finals.
It's a great period on the show. Brianna Stewart is very good at basketball. I don't have any more to add.
I have 2 things that are like kind of like cornerstones of my summer, Brendan. One is seeing Boy Genius. The other is seeing Brianna Stewart play the Las Vegas Aces and seeing Asia Wilson and Brianna Stewart and all of that talent in the same arena.
Amen.
Amen. All right, that's going to be it for Just Basketball for Tuesday, May 30th. I'm Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. We'll be back on Thursday after Game 1 of the NBA Finals. That is Denver. That is the Miami Heat. Denver has home court advantage, so Game 1 will be in Denver at altitude. Can't wait to break down the full series. Thanks again to Jake Stevens and Dillon Heiser for producing. Please subscribe on your podcast platform of choice if you're not already, and on YouTube if you're down for that. But thanks everyone for tuning in. Be well and enjoy the hoops.